All right, John, let's bring you into the conversation here in the 3 o'clock hour. We talked a lot about who will be the player on the Eagles offense to step up, or who needs to be that guy. Is it a new player, or is it a guy from the previous regime that you think is going to be the guy that steps up on offense and we're talking a lot about this year?
Well, I think the obvious answer is Carson Wentz, but beyond him, I would say LeGarrette Blount. I need a running game. I want a 1,000-yard runner, hopefully double-digit touchdowns. I can't expect 17, but I think if they have a significant running game and they can sort of balance out this offense, I think that helps Carson Wentz. I think that makes this a much better Eagles team. And the piecemeal, Darren Sproles is a very good player. We've talked about the potential of Donnell Pumphrey and even Wendell Smallwood, but LeGarrette Blount's got to be the guy. You got to have a bell cow back that is going to be there each and every week. And I think then you almost force the coaching staff to run the football, which I think is important.
John, I want to kind of go down some of the candidates here and get your thoughts on why they could be the guy to step up. And the one that Pete brought up, I'll let him throw your way, but the one that I brought up was Zach Ertz. And of course, we got the text message saying, well, I thought we've heard his name for the last 3 years. And we brought back a quote from way back in like week 4 or 5 where he was coming off an injury and he was asked, Doug Peterson was asked, well, how come Ertz wasn't more involved? And he says, well, he's in the game. Well, he wasn't targeted till the fourth quarter. And then he went on this kind of diatribe saying that, well, we need to get him more involved. I need to do a better job of, game planning for him. But there is this perception that a lot of his production is clumped into late season runs. But do you think that more consistency is in the cards for Zach Ertz?
I don't know. I think he's a pretty consistent player to begin with. I wrote about this earlier in the offseason. I don't know what the expectations are. He was 5th amongst tight ends and receiving last year. How much higher can he go? I get the consistency. There's been those spikes, those big spikes in games that don't matter, although I would argue when you play 16 games, every game matters. And the fact that there's one football and he's a tight end. Tight ends don't catch the ball 120 times. So he's up at 80. That's pretty good. You're not going much higher. And I think with Alshon Jeffery here, Torrey Smith, and the improved receiving corps, if anything, he's going to go down. That's not necessarily that he's going to be a worse football player. It's just you're going to have to spread the football around more. And I think that'll help the Eagles. So as far as being a breakout candidate, as I titled the column, he's already broke out. People haven't noticed. He's one of the best receiving tight ends in football.
So Mike went with Zach Ertz, John. I chose Jordan Matthews, and even though he only had 3 touchdowns last year, we all know what a dearth of weapons that Carson Wentz had to throw to. It was basically Jordan Matthews and nobody else out there to throw to, so it's obvious that his numbers were going to go down. You talked about the bolstering of the receiving core. Is Jordan Matthews a guy that you think is poised for a breakout season, given the fact that Torrey Smith is here and Alshon Jeffery is here?
Well, Jordan Matthews is a strange character in this Eagles team for the reason I get the sense, and I've mentioned before, this coaching staff is not really 100% behind him. They would prefer receivers who could move around more, and they sort of pigeonholed him as just a slot receiver. On the other hand, he's been a very productive slot receiver. He catches the football. Now, you might compare him to sort of a 20-point scorer in the NBA on a bad team. Somebody's got to catch the football if you had no other receivers. And that was some of the case with Jordan Matthews. I could see the Eagles trading him for a cornerback, for instance. If there was another team that had issues at the receiver position and needed some help, and obviously the Eagles need help at corner. And while I say that, I could also see him leading the Eagles in receiving. because he is a good player. But I just get the feeling that the way Doug Peterson and Frank Reich want to run this offense, they would prefer to have receivers that could play all three slots so they can sort of tinker with the formation. And I think ultimately this is going to be Jordan Matthews' last year in Philadelphia. Now, that's not answering the question because I don't know. He could be very productive, or as I said, he could be traded in August. So he's a very interesting character on this team.
Talk with John McMullen, taking a look at guys on the Eagles offense right now who could step up. Who will step up for the Eagles offense? Kind of giving John the candidates, and he will give us reasons why they could or may not. What about Torrey Smith? He seems like a guy that everybody thinks could be a one-and-doner. I think he's a guy that adds something that they haven't had. Do you think he's a guy that could really surpass the expectations and really step up for this offense, because he is the guy that has something they haven't had since Deshaun left?
Yeah, I mean, he's got deep speed. There's no question about it. And this is a true one-year prove-it deal for Torrey Smith because he's coming off a really, really bad season. Part of that is being with a bad team with bad quarterbacks and a bad coach and a bad system. But he didn't play well. And if you go to the Pro Football Focus numbers, and we always talk about Nelson Agholor being rated the worst receiver in football last season, well, the guy right in front of him, second to worst, was Torrey Smith. So he did not perform well. And if he continues to play the way he did in San Francisco, he's going to be one and done. There's no question about it. I mean, he played very poorly. But I think he's revitalized, getting out of that situation, getting in more of a traditional offense. I think he's going to be utilized correctly as a deep threat to stretch the field, while sort of Alshon Jeffery, Zach Ertz, Jordan Matthews, if he's here, do the heavy lifting. So I think he's got a chance. But the bugaboo, as I said, the film from last year was not good. Not good at all. And the wild card to all of this is Nelson Agholor. If he could carry over the strong spring into the summer, they got to find a way to get him on the field, as strange as that sounds.
You walked right into Agholor, and I wanted to ask you because one of the things on Agholor that, obviously he's been a bust. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. He has not been good. He deserves to be criticized. Anything critical about him should not be ignored. But the notion that, hey, just because it's mini camp and that he has looked like a different player, I don't think that can be discounted. I don't think that should just be pushed aside. I think for guys like yourself that cover the league and see these guys, yes, they're not wearing full uniforms and they only have shorts and T-shirts and helmets on. But I think what you guys are great at, and that the fact that you're there every day, you can go back a year and say, man, from where he was at minicamp last year to this year, I noticed a big difference. And I'm not saying that you do or didn't. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm asking that question. Is it a noticeable difference to say that, hey, you know what? Maybe this guy's a late bloomer. It used to be 3 years. Maybe this guy's that guy. Or guess what? Is it just, I don't think this guy's getting on the field. I don't think they have any plans for him, and he stinks. I don't know which one it is. I'll ask you, is he a guy that there's intrigue around, there was so much buzz around him in minicamp? Is it just because we're looking for something to talk about, or is there legitimacy behind it?
There's some legitimacy behind it. I think some people went overboard. I saw one writer who mentioned he was the best player on the field. He was not by any stretch of the imagination. He was not the best receiver. That was by far Alshon Jeffery, who I didn't see drop the ball through the entire, basically, off season, whereas Nelson still had the drops occasionally. And he would mark them himself in his own locker because he's trying to improve to such a degree. But as far as the improvement from year to year, yeah, he was a drastically different player from the season before, and you could see the confidence brewing. And that's one of the reasons I intimated the Matthews thing, because this team has to find a way to improve the cornerback position. They have to find a way to do it. If it's via trade, you have to look for the logical candidates. We've talked about Jason Kelsey in the past, Michael Kendricks. You have Matthews in that category now. One of the reasons is because Agholor excelled in the slot when Matthews was hurt for most of the off-season work. And if that can carry on, say 2-3 weeks into August, well, all of a sudden, the talent with that kid is real. He was not a first-round pick by mistake. The quickness is there. The speed is there. All of that is there. It's been more of a mental block with him. And when he makes a poor play, when he drops the football, you could see in years past it's weighed on him, and it starts to snowball. I don't know if he can get over that from a mental standpoint. That's a big question. And it's obvious you can't pencil in Nelson Agholor and say he's going to contribute, but he's at least intriguing. That's the best you can hope for after watching the first 2 years of his NFL career.
John McMullen with us as we ponder the question, who will step up on offense for the Eagles? And I know, John, you said LeGarrette Blount is a choice maybe for you at running back. It's hard to say that a 34-year-old maybe in the last year of his career is the step-up guy, but what do you expect out of Darren Sproles moving forward?
Well, you know what you're getting out of Darren Sproles, and that's a lot of good. But you can't expect to give him the football 20 times a game. I mean, if you do that, he's going to be shot by week 8 or week 9. He's going to be pretty much useless in the second half of the season. He is what he has always been, and that's a specialist, a guy who can be explosive, touching the football 5 to 10 times a game. And that's the role he excels at. That's the role he should be in. And that's why I bring up Blount. That's not what the Eagles need. The Eagles had that, and they they have had it with Darren Sproles. Now they need the big back. They need the RB1. They need the guy who's going to be there every single week, moving the chains. And obviously, LeGarrette Blount has the size to do that. He's done it in the past, and he has to do it for this team to be drastically improved offensively.
How about behind Sproles, Wendell Smallwood? Does he step up?
I don't think he's going to have many opportunities, and if he does, it's going to be for a bad situation in that LeGarrette's going to be hurt or not playing. So, look, you need backups in this league, and right now that's what Wendell Smallwood is. His job is going to be to step up if somebody tweaks an ankle and maybe carry the team for one particular Sunday. But no, he's not going to have the opportunity to touch the football enough to be one of those guys. And if he does, it's because something bad happened as far as injuries go.
Hey, John, one guy we kind of glossed over was Alshon Jeffery, and I guess we don't include him because we all anticipate that he will not step up because he's already thought to be a big-time player. But he does have some stuff to prove, right? I mean, he's been injury-prone. He had the suspension last year. So he might need to step up to justify them bringing him back next year.
Oh, sure. I mean, he's got to have a big season. I mean, his contract is not sort of like Torrey's, which is a straight prove-it deal. I mean, the Eagles know what type of player Alshon Jeffery is, and the plan is to work out something long-term after this season. But if the injuries crop up, if another suspension would be a disaster for him, if anything of that nature happens, then he is going to be done in 1 year. So it's not like he doesn't have anything to prove. But what we do know and why we don't put Alshon Jeffery in that equation as far as guys stepping up is the fact that when he has been on the field, he's produced. And if he is on the field, he's going to produce for the Eagles. He's too good a football player not to.
Yeah, and, the obvious guy of stepping up is Carson Wentz. I think, John, there's more pressure, or there should be more pressure. When you're the number 2 pick and they trade what they did to get you, You deserve to have pressure on you. I don't have a problem saying that Wentz has the pressure, right?
Yeah, I mean, every quarterback in this league has pressure. But, yeah, anytime you're drafted that high, it's sort of elevated, and you're expected to be the face of this franchise. I mean, and that's incredible pressure. But that's one of the good things about Carson Wentz throughout his entire rookie season is whether he's playing well, like the first 3 games, or when he was struggling with his mechanics late and he sort of got banged up. The one aspect you can say throughout the whole season that was consistent is the fact that the stage wasn't too big for him. He didn't seem overwhelmed by it, and he isn't affected by all that pressure type stuff that some other guys obviously are affected by. And I would say Jared Goff, the one guy picked in front of him, is a perfect example of that. So I don't think you have to worry about that part of it from Carson Wentz, and then it's just about showing the incremental improvement and showing that he's fixed some of the mechanical flaws, and I think you'll see a better player.
Yeah, Wentz, there's a lot riding on him because the Eagles went out and they got pieces for him here. They got the running back. They've added, 3 wide receivers. And then the offensive line is very high regarded. That puts a lot of pressure on a young guy, but guess what? That's what you get drafted number 2 for, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. And as years go on, keep going by, they want you to succeed faster. They want you to get right out there and be successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think already you're looking at people are already starting to the whispers, or if the Eagles don't improve, if they don't push for a playoff spot, is Doug Peterson's job on the line? Is Frank Reich's? Is John DeFilippo? Everybody kind of looks at him as a rising star in the coaching ranks. Is he sort of the heir apparent in waiting if something doesn't happen? It's ridiculous how people have sped this up and expect results. And the fact that the Eagles won 7 games last year, and arguably if Lane Johnson was out there, they would have been in the playoff hunt. And all this, remember, we always go back to it, despite the fact that Carson Wentz was the 3rd-string quarterback 8 days before the start of the regular season. Wasn't supposed to play at all. And then Howie Roseman got the call from Minnesota, and everything changed. So this was supposed to be week 1. This was supposed to be his first NFL start. So I think the Eagles are way ahead of the curve as far as Carson Wentz goes. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be Super Bowl contenders. I don't think they are. I think people that expect that are expecting a little too much. But, yeah, you have to expect improvement.
Certainly don't think, in my opinion anyway, Super Bowl contender, playoff contender. And in the NFL, John, if you're in the playoffs, I mean, typically all the teams have a shot. But I think the NFL is becoming the NBA, where if you don't have that quarterback, you're not in. I mean, the quarterbacks that now win and go, are the top 5 guys. It's Brady, it's Russell Wilson, it's Roethlisberger, it's Rodgers. If you don't have one of those guys, you're just you're a team that's the a nice NBA playoff one and done or a second round exit anymore. You got to have one of those quarterbacks. That's the way the league's going.
Yeah, I think you can make sort of a 1-year run with if you put together
if you got that great defense
around. Yeah. But look at the Final Four last year. Look what it was. Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, the MVP, and Aaron Rodgers. That's the Final Four of the NFL.
Yep.
And arguably those were the 4 best quarterbacks in football last year. So that's not a coincidence. It makes it much more difficult to make a run unless you have a franchise quarterback. The Eagles think they have one. He's not there yet. And I think it's too early to say he's definitely going to be a franchise quarterback, but that's also, what your definition is. Does that mean Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, or does that mean Joe Flacco? Joe won a Super Bowl, but I think Carson Wentz is going to be a 10-year starter here minimum, and I think a lot of other teams in the NFL would like to be in the Eagles situation when it comes to the quarterback position.
Here's a question for you, okay? This is something that just popped into my head. Because, if Carson Wentz, you just said 10-year quarterback. So the first thing that popped in my head when you say that is, okay, is he a 10-year quarterback? If his career ends up being Phillip Rivers with no Super Bowl appearance, will he be embraced by the Philly fans?
That's interesting.
Because he was a popular pick. He's a popular pick. The fans embraced him. He was the Wentz wagon, Pennsylvania. He wasn't McNabb. He didn't get booed. They wanted this kid, and they got him. But if he goes 10 years and has a Phillip Rivers-like career with big numbers but no playoff success, no Super Bowl, in the end, will he be embraced?
Well, I'll say this. If you tell me he's going to have Phillip Rivers' career, I'd say, where do I sign up? Now, because that's a top-level quarterback who, due to circumstance, has never gotten as far as he probably should have been. And I go back to that draft, and I will argue all day that Phillip Rivers is a better quarterback than Eli Manning. Always has been, always will be. One guy's got 2 Super Bowls, the other guy has got 0. So I think people kind of boil it down with quarterbacks to one thing, and it's not fair, and that's Super Bowl championships. I would hope that the Eagles fans are intelligent enough to say, if he has Phillip Rivers' career, that was a heck of a run. But when you're talking about, since 1960, never won a Super Bowl, everybody else in division has multiple Super Bowls, this fan base wants a Super Bowl. So ultimately, I think that will be deemed a failure.
John McMullen, everybody, 97.3 ESPN.com, at JF McMullen on Twitter. And, of course, the Eagles open camp in less than 2 weeks. We are all over it. And, of course, you're home for Eagles football, 97.3 ESPN. John, take care, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.